Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are unpacking how professionals make those really high-stakes financial decisions when, frankly, the future is entirely unknown. We're going to explore the fascinating world of break-even and sensitivity analysis and look at the actual tools engineers and project managers rely on to navigate uncertainty and safeguard their investments.
All right, let's just jump right in and address a major trap that decision makers fall into all the time: the illusion of certainty. Up to a certain point in economic analysis, it's super tempting to just assume a high degree of confidence in your estimated values. But the harsh reality of unforeseen production delays or wild market shifts, that proves otherwise. In virtually all engineering situations, the ultimate economic results are completely unknown. You literally cannot predict the future with 100% accuracy.
And that raises a massive, critical question for anyone making decisions. How exactly do you confidently invest millions of dollars when time and uncertainty dictate the future? Think about it. Large-scale engineering projects require massive sums of upfront cash, and it can take a really long time to actually see any financial outcomes. Trying to predict those revenue and cost streams over years or even decades is incredibly daunting.
To understand how we actually pull this off, we have to draw a really sharp line between two fields. On one side, you have accounting. Accounting safely looks backward at past performance and evaluates what has already happened. But on the other side, we have engineering economy. This field forces us to bravely step forward and predict risky future events. It's all about evaluating alternatives and making investment choices based on estimates of a future that, hasn't happened yet.
So, here is our roadmap for today's explainer. 1. The illusion of certainty. 2. Managing your project risks. 3. The break-even point. 4. Sensitivity and scenario analysis. And 5. The OMLP technique.
Section 1. The illusion of certainty and why predicting the future is the hardest part of any economic study.
Let's ground this in a real-world example, okay? Before Apple could set their $999 retail starting price for the 64GB iPhone X, they had to estimate the production cost. And that estimated cost came out to around $412.75. Just imagine the immense, real-world pressure of that estimation process. Estimating costs, revenues, useful lives, salvage values, it is often the absolute most difficult, expensive, and time-consuming part of any study. Setting selling prices or deciding if a product can even be manufactured at a profit hinges entirely on getting these future estimates right.
Which brings us to Section 2, managing your project risks. Basically, the decision maker's survival toolkit.
Now, it's so easy to look at risk and view it as just a roll of the dice, right? But professionals absolutely do not leave their investments up to chance. Since we know we can't perfectly predict the future, we just have to accept that our original estimates will inevitably be incorrect to some degree, and managing that reality requires some very specific analytical procedures.
So, the crucial takeaway here is that engineers rely on three main heroes to manage these risks. First, sensitivity analysis. Second, break-even analysis. And third, scenario analysis. These are the go-to procedures that help us understand exactly how our decisions might shift when our initial estimates inevitably miss the mark.
Moving on to Section 3, the break-even point. When do we actually start making a profit?
Simply put, the break-even point is this magical mathematical sweet spot where you are completely indifferent between two choices. And hey, often one of those choices is just to do nothing. Mathematically speaking, it's the point where the equivalent worth calculations of alternative A and alternative B are exactly equal. It's the exact moment your total costs finally match your total revenues.
And you can see this happening visually. Notice how fixed and variable costs climb upward, but sales revenue climbs even steeper. The intersection of those lines right there, that's the break-even point. It is the exact moment the blue profit zone overtakes the red loss zone. Every project manager, every business owner is desperately racing to cross out of that red triangle and into the blue.
To make this abstract math a bit more real, let's look at a practical scenario from our source material. Imagine Jim. Jim drives a perfectly functional 1998 Honda, but it only gets 20 miles per gallon. He wants to drive for a ride-hailing service like GrabCar, and he finds a newer car that gets 26 miles per gallon. He can sell his old car for $2,800 and buy the new one for $4,000. Assuming gasoline is $4 a gallon, break-even analysis lets Jim calculate exactly how many miles he must drive before the fuel savings actually pay for the cost of upgrading his vehicle. It completely takes the guesswork out of the decision.
But what if Jim's gas prices violently fluctuate, or his new car needs unexpected repairs? This brings us to Section 4, Sensitivity and Scenario Analysis, where we test the limits of our estimates. So, sensitivity analysis. This is where we poke and prod the data. It allows us to change one factor at a time. We tweak a single variable, maybe the initial investment, the annual revenue, or the lifespan of the equipment, and we watch how it impacts the bottom line. It's a procedure specifically designed to identify which single variable poses the biggest threat to our project's survival and overall acceptability.
And we can visually track that sensitivity by plotting the data. For instance, consider Acme Delivery. They're analyzing a $1.9 million package tracking technology upgrade that promises $680,000 in annual savings. By using a spreadsheet and plotting it out, they can see exactly how sensitive their net present value is to a 10%, 20%, or 30% shift in initial costs versus a shift in income. Basically, the steeper the line on the chart, the more sensitive the project is to that specific variable.
Meanwhile, scenario analysis takes a much broader approach. Instead of just changing one variable at a time, scenario analysis groups multiple variables together. We establish a standard base case, and then we compare it against the most extreme possible outcomes, usually your best-case scenario and your worst-case scenario. This really helps us understand the full spectrum of what could happen out there in the real world.
Which leads us to Section 5, the OMLP technique, structuring the best, expected, and worst-case scenarios.
Think of the OMLP technique as this fantastic storytelling device, but one that is firmly rooted in strict mathematics. First, we establish the absolute best case or optimistic condition. Theoretically, this occurs about 1 out of 20 times. Then, we define the most likely condition, which is the expected case that happens roughly 18 out of 20 times. Finally, we map out the dreaded worst case or pessimistic condition, which, just like the optimistic one, has about a 1 in 20 chance of occurring.
Let's look at a major investment in a new construction crane to see how wildly these factors can swing. In our most optimistic hopes, the crane costs $240,000, lasts for 10 years, and brings in $100,000 annually. But in our pessimistic fears, the investment balloons to $340,000, the crane breaks down after just 5 years, and revenues drop to $50,000. By calculating the project's worth under each of these grouped scenarios, we can instantly see if the project survives our worst fears or if we really need to spend more time refining our estimates before pulling the trigger.
Ultimately, successfully applying this entire risk toolkit, the break-even analysis, the sensitivity testing, the OMLP technique, it ensures we select the right investments. As our source material points out, we absolutely want to select the most profitable projects, but we must do so while allowing for intangibles, the massive reality of risk, and the simple fact that we always have limited capital available to us.
So, here is a provocative thought to leave you with today. We've seen how powerful these tools are for managing the illusion of certainty. But no matter how pristine our break-even charts are, or how incredibly detailed our OMLP math gets, if all our economic models rely on estimating an inherently unknown future, can any purely mathematical decision ever truly be free from risk? Think about it. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I hope this gives you a whole new lens for viewing your next big project decision.